That afternoon, I was finishing the last few lines of a report when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number, not saved in my contacts, flashed on the screen with the words, "Emergency call," making my heart skip a beat. I almost didn't pick up. But something strange, cold, crawled down my spine like a premonition of a nightmare. I never thought a single phone call could rip apart the world I was living in, but it did. And from that moment on, nothing was ever the same. "Hello? Is this Miss Layla Morgan?" the man on the line asked. Calm, polite, but unfamiliar. I nodded instinctively before realizing he couldn't see me. "Yes, this is she. What's going on?" "This is Carl, a loan officer with Prescott and Maynard Bank. We're calling regarding a mortgage loan of $498,000 that is currently 3 months past due. Have you received our payment reminders?" I shot up like I'd been electrocuted, my office chair nearly toppling behind me. "Wait, what? I haven't taken out any mortgage. I don't even own a home." "I understand this may come as a surprise," he continued, his tone steady. "However, the file we have contains your full name, date of birth, social security number, and your signature. The loan was signed in April, 3 years ago." April. 3 years ago. The date floated vaguely in my mind. I was working full-time at a law firm then, renting a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. Ava, my younger sister, was crashing at our parents' place after a breakup. I remembered her endlessly talking about wanting to buy a 3-bedroom house in the New Jersey suburbs. But she had no money. I gripped the phone tighter. "Is there any chance this is a mistake? Could someone have used my information without my knowledge?" "Ms. Morgan, that's exactly why we're calling. If you confirm that you did not authorize the loan, we advise you to check your credit report and file a police report for identity theft. But first, can you confirm your email address so we can send over a copy of the mortgage documents?" I gave him my email, throat dry as sand. When the message arrived, I nearly stopped breathing as I opened the attachment. The loan contract spanned 12 pages. Every page had my name, my details, and, what chilled me the most, my signature at the bottom. Except, it wasn't mine. It looked close, the curve of the L, the slant of the M, but it was too perfect, like someone had practiced 100 times before signing. It lacked the slight shake I always had when signing legal papers. It didn't have the faint ink smudge I usually left behind. My head buzzed. I collapsed back into my chair, heart pounding like war drums. My office suddenly felt smaller, stifling. I didn't know whether to be furious or terrified. I began rifling through drawers, pulling out every bill, tax copy, and old letter, anything to prove I'd never signed that loan. But the more I searched, the more a cold hollowness grew in my chest. Because if this wasn't a mistake, there was only one explanation: someone in my family had done this. And the only person who had ever complained about not qualifying for a mortgage was Ava. A cold fury spread from deep in my gut. Not because of the money, but because of the silence. No heads up, no permission, no warning. Just one brutal truth: I had been used. I looked up at the family photo on the wall. My parents seated in the middle. Ava and I on either side, arms linked, grinning during my graduation. A picture that once meant love, now made me want to smash it against the floor. My phone buzzed again. A message from Mom. "Hi, sweetie. Come home for dinner this Sunday. We miss you." My throat tightened. No mention of the loan. No word about the almost $500,000. To them, everything was still just fine. I typed one word, "Sure," and hit send. Because I needed to know the truth. And this time, I wouldn't stay silent. I don't even remember how I drove home after that message. I only recall bursting through the apartment door, tossing my bag onto the couch, and rushing to my desk. My hands were shaking so badly, it took 3 tries to type in my laptop password correctly. I logged into my email and opened the PDF from the bank again. Every time I saw that forged signature, it felt like an invisible slap. My name, my social security number, my birth date, even my old address in Ohio. All accurate. Disturbingly accurate. I zoomed in on each signature. There were 3 versions: the main loan agreement, an addendum page, and a payment commitment. Each one had Layla Morgan printed in neat, deliberate strokes. Too polished to be mine. I had never signed like that. I pulled out old documents from my drawer. My apartment lease, a previous resignation letter, medical paperwork, all with my real signature. I laid them side by side. My heart pounded. It was clearly forged. Yet whoever did it had done it disturbingly well. Well enough that an average bank employee wouldn't catch it. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Each of those fake signatures was a cold slap in the face. Someone had trained themselves to impersonate me. Not once, but at least 3 times on legal documents. It couldn't have been a stranger. It couldn't have been random. Only someone close could have had the access and reference to do this. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I pulled up my credit report. A full scan cost $29, and I didn't hesitate to pay. Minutes later, my full financial history loaded, and there it was. A mortgage loan for $498,300, opened on April 12, 3 years ago, under my name, marked with a giant red flag. Overdue 3 months. Negative impact. Hi. My chest tightened. Not just the mortgage. There were 2 unfamiliar credit cards too. One opened that same month, another 2 weeks later. Both carried current balances over $8,000. At this point, I had no doubts. Someone in my family had stolen my identity and built a fake financial profile to borrow hundreds of thousands in my name, and I had no idea. I shot up, pacing the room like a cornered animal. Each step fueled the rage swelling inside me. I remembered the one time Ava mentioned that house in Newark, how she bragged about getting the loan, thanks to knowing the right tricks. I thought she was bluffing for pride. Turns out she wasn't lying. I was the trick. I yanked open my desk drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. The one I kept my most important things in. A copy of my college diploma, my birth certificate, a letter from Dad before he passed, and the birthday cards Mom sent me each year. I opened one from 3 years ago. Her familiar loopy handwriting read, "You're the strong one in this family. We're proud of you, Layla. Thank you for growing into such a responsible, independent woman. Love, Mom." Independent? A source of strength? How could she write words like that, while secretly using my identity as a financial tool? I tore the card in half, then into quarters, then eighths, until all that remained were scraps scattered at my feet. I had never felt such a chilling sensation, not because spring in New York still held a lingering chill, but because the ones I loved most had become the ones who betrayed me. I grabbed my phone, opened the Notes app, and began listing. In this list, PDF copy of the loan agreement from the bank. Credit report with negative debt flag. Suspicious credit cards opened around the same time. Verified samples of my real signature. A scanned copy of the birthday card showing timeline and family dynamic. I saved it all, and emailed a backup to my secondary email just in case. At that moment, a thought crept into my mind. If they had done this once without being caught, who knows what else they had done? I went back to my laptop, logged into my social security profile, and checked previous tax filings. And I froze when I saw that in that year, I was reported as having an extra source of income from property rental. I had never owned any property. Not once. I sat motionless for almost 10 minutes. In my head, every sound faded to silence. Each passing second only made one thing clearer. I had been stolen from. Not just money, but my identity, my control, and my future. And I wasn't going to let it go. That Sunday afternoon was gray like a storm warning. I parked in front of the house I had grown up in, the white one with blue trim, silent at the end of Maple Street. Standing before that familiar wooden door, I took a deep breath, as if preparing to enter a courtroom where I was both witness and victim. I had prepared for this dinner all week, not with words, but with silence. Intentional, weighted, purposeful silence. Because in this house, yelling would be ignored, but silence, used at the right moment, could be a weapon. The door opened. My mother, Susan, greeted me with her familiar smile. Her lily perfume wafted through the air. A scent so familiar it now made me nauseous. "Layla, you finally made it. I was afraid work would get in the way again," she said, pulling me inside as if nothing had happened, as if this family hadn't quietly trapped me in nearly $500,000 of debt. I smiled faintly. How could I refuse? You called me the backbone of the family after all. She didn't notice the bite in my voice, or maybe she chose not to. Inside, my father, Thomas, was glued to the TV, watching baseball with his usual beer balanced on the armrest. My sister Ava sprawled on the couch, fingers tapping away on her phone, her bright red nails clicking lightly on the screen. "You're here," Ava said, still staring at her phone. She wore a tight new dress, her glittering Gucci belt glaring like a scratch across an otherwise modest room. I headed to the kitchen to help my mother set the table. Roast chicken, tossed salad, mashed potatoes. Our typical Sunday dinner. Everything was painfully familiar, eerily precise. As if the past week had been a bad dream. We sat down. My mother poured lemonade into each glass, while my father mumbled something about the Yankees. Ava complained about a surprise power outage, then pivoted to the overgrown grass in the backyard of her new house. "It's so annoying. The grass grows like crazy, and the landscaping company raised their prices," she said, not looking up. I set down my fork and lifted my gaze. "I have a question," I said calmly like I was asking for the salt. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Curious, unalarmed. They still thought I was the old Layla, obedient, agreeable, endlessly tolerant. "Does anyone know anything about a mortgage under my name, one for nearly $500,000? The room froze. The ticking wall clock became deafening. Ava shifted, tugging down her sleeve nervously. My mother set down her glass, slower than usual. My father coughed, looking away. I kept my tone steady, eyes locked on theirs. Finally my mother spoke, voice sweet but slightly shaky. "Oh, that... Layla, don't blow it out of proportion. It was just some paperwork. Ava needed help qualifying. You have excellent credit, financial stability. So you used your daughter's identity, signed a mortgage loan in her name without asking," I interrupted, voice low but firm. "That's your idea of helping? You didn't lose anything," Ava snapped, voice rising, shifting from nervous to defensive. "Everything's fine, right? What's the big deal? I needed support." "Family supports each other." I tilted my head toward her. "Support? By forging my signature? Stealing my personal info? Locking me into nearly $500,000 of debt I knew nothing about?" My father finally spoke, voice bored. "You're the strong one, Layla. This kind of stuff is just paperwork. People do it all the time. You're being too sensitive." I chuckled. "Quiet. Sharp as steel." "And what kind of man stays silent while his wife commits fraud against his daughter?" No one responded. My mother swallowed hard. Ava looked away. My father changed the channel. I nodded slowly. "Thanks for the explanation." I stood, grabbed my wallet and keys. "Enjoy your dinner." "Layla, wait. You're making a big deal out of this," my mother called out. I paused at the door, looked back, voice still calm. "No, Mom. It became a big deal the moment you decided to sign my name on a loan application. Then I stepped outside. The rain had just begun to fall. Each drop on my jacket felt like it was washing off the final illusion of this family. I was no longer the old Layla, the daughter who paid in silence. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. And I wouldn't forgive easily. As for them, they had no idea the real storm had just begun. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I sent an email to my manager requesting a personal day, no explanation needed. I think she sensed it in my tone the day before. The quiet weight of someone standing at the edge, too focused for deadlines or KPIs. I threw on a gray sweater and dark jeans. Simple, clean, discreet. My mind wasn't concerned with fashion. Not when I was about to meet a lawyer about identity theft. Committed by my own family. The cafe where I had arranged the meeting sat tucked between a laundromat and an antique shop on Fifth Avenue. No one paid attention. No one eavesdropped. A perfect place to plan a counterattack. Exactly at 9 o'clock he arrived, Jonathan Reeves. A seasoned real estate attorney, well known in New Jersey legal circles for his fast, decisive and discreet style. He was nearly 60 years old, with salt and pepper hair, a tailored gray and black suit, and eyes sharp as a scalpel. "You're Layla Morgan?" he asked, shaking my hand without any hint of pleasantries. "Yes. Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice." I handed him the carefully prepared folder. The forged loan contract, my credit report, a copy of my ID, and the notes I had compiled over 3 sleepless nights. He flipped through each page, his expression unreadable, except for a slight raise of his eyebrow when he reached the signature. "You're certain the signature on the contract is forged?" "Mom, 100% sure. This is my real signature," I said, pulling out a past rental agreement with my old signature. "And this one here, on the mortgage. It's not mine. The ink is too even, the strokes too smooth. It's too perfect to be real." Reeves nodded, closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "This is identity fraud for financial gain, a serious matter considering it involves a loan of more than $400,000. If you choose to pursue this, I will represent you. But you need to understand one thing. If the person behind this is a family member, your relationship with them, it will not survive." I gripped my cold coffee tightly. I tried to be the good daughter, the good sister. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my family. But they were never afraid of losing me. They were only afraid of losing their tool. I looked straight into his eyes. "I choose to protect myself, even if it means losing everything." Reeves stayed quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. "All right. We'll start with the police." We left the cafe an hour later. He took his own car while I drove my old Honda Civic to the local precinct. The building was small, with pale yellow walls, and the faint smell of old paperwork and stale coffee hanging in the air. I carried the file and walked up to the intake desk. "Hello, how can I help you?" the officer on duty, a woman, asked. "I'd like to file a report for identity theft and financial fraud," I said firmly. "The identity used is mine, and the loan amount is nearly $500,000. The officer paused, then motioned for me to follow her into a room in the back. We sat down at a table. I handed over the file, along with a copy of my ID and verified signature. She reviewed each page, her face gradually turning serious. "Do you suspect anyone specific?" Without hesitation I replied. "My mother, Susan Morgan. My sister, Ava Morgan. And possibly my father, Thomas Morgan. They are the only ones with access to all my personal information." She took notes silently. Finally, she set her pen down and asked, "Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? Once this file enters the system, the case will be officially investigated." I nodded. "If I don't do this, they'll keep taking. And I'll keep losing." I signed the report. She stamped it. A small dry sound, but I knew it marked a turning point. There was no going back. That very afternoon, I sent a formal complaint to Prescott and Maynard Bank. I attached the police report, a personal statement, and requested that the mortgage be suspended under legal dispute. I sent it by certified mail with return receipt, so no one could claim ignorance. How did I feel afterward? Not relief. Not at all. Just a terrifying quiet. Like I had just activated a time bomb and was now standing in the room, waiting for the first shards to fall. That evening, I didn't eat. I just sat by the apartment window, watching the city lights flicker on. I no longer hoped for apologies or reconciliation. I had only one thing left: the resolve to reclaim everything they had taken, through law, through truth, through a silence sharper than any accusation. 1 week after I filed the report, my phone rang just before 8 in the evening. The caller ID showed my mother's name, Susan Morgan. In nearly 15 years of owning a phone, I had never felt that name hit my throat like a stone. I let it ring 3 times before answering, saying nothing. Her voice came through, gentle, as if nothing had ever gone wrong between us. "Layla, I think we should talk, calmly, as a family. Maybe this is all a misunderstanding? Your father wants to see you too. Ava as well. Everyone's tired of this tension." I stayed silent. Outside the window, car lights streaked down 36th Street like broken memories. "Finally," I said. "Winery?" "I made a reservation at Kingswood Restaurant Friday night. 6:30, no arguing, just talking." I hung up without giving an answer. But I knew I would go. Not to reconcile, but to see which part they were playing in their latest performance. Kingswood, a dated but favored spot among the suburban middle-aged, in New Jersey, was elegantly staged. Low-hanging crystal chandeliers, warm golden lighting, burgundy leather seats, landscape paintings that tried to look antique, the perfect stage for the picture-perfect family my mother always tried to portray. I arrived at 6:28. They were already seated at table number 14, a corner spot near the fireplace. My mother wore a cream sweater, a silk scarf, and held a glass of red wine. Ava sat with crossed legs, dark red lipstick, phone face down on the table. My father, as usual, wore a worn-out suit, his eyes hollow, but pretending calm. "Layla, you're here," my mother smiled. "Take a seat, sweetie." I pulled out the chair and sat. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. Ava spoke first. "You know, things have gotten out of hand. I think we all overreacted a bit." I said nothing. Just stared at my mother. "You called me here for what?" I asked, my voice low and slow. My mother glanced around, then lowered her voice as if afraid someone would overhear. "Layla, I know you're upset. But this is a family matter. Bringing in the police, lawyers, it's not necessary. We can resolve this privately. You still have your apartment, right?" I squinted. "What do you mean?" Ava pulled a folder from her bag, placed it on the table and slid it toward me. "It's an agreement. Just a clarification document. It confirms everything was a misunderstanding, and that you agree to transfer the apartment to me, since I covered most of the down payment." I let out a quiet laugh. No joy, no anger. Just cold. "And that mortgage contract with the forged signature is also a misunderstanding? And this paper? You call it an agreement, but what it really is a transfer of property?" My father chimed in, trying to sound rational. "You have your apartment in Brooklyn, stable and all. Ava's house is her foundation, possibly for her future. You don't really need it." I laughed again, with edge this time. "So I don't need the property in my name, but I do need to shoulder a debt of nearly $500,000 caused by someone else?" My mother leaned in. "Layla, you don't understand. If the media finds out, our family's reputation is ruined. Your father will lose his standing in the parish board. I won't be able to face anyone at church. Ava will never qualify for another loan." I shook my head. "None of you cared about my reputation when you used my name. Why care about face now? Ava snapped, no longer polite. You're being selfish. I just want a stable life. Everyone says you're successful, brilliant. You have everything. Why do you have to take everything from me too? I pushed the folder back toward them, unopened. I'm not taking anything. I'm reclaiming what was always mine. And I'm not signing anything. Not today, not ever. My father muttered something, eyes down, fingers tapping his water glass. My mother softened her tone, pleading. You don't have to sign now, just think about it. I'm begging you, Layla. I stood up. Cold, resolute. I'd been thinking about it for 3 years, Mom, and you took 3 seconds to sign my name onto a mortgage. I'm just repaying the debt you chose on my behalf. At full cost. I turned and walked away. No glance back. No farewell. Each step out of that restaurant felt lighter. Like I was crushing every illusion they had built around me. Outside, it was raining. Cold, damp and real. Unlike the dinner we'd just shared. I had just stepped out of the bathroom when the doorbell slammed into my head like a hammer. Looking through the peephole, I saw her. Hair a tangled mix of gray and brown, holding an oversized handbag like she was heading into battle. Her face had lost its usual composure. Instead, it was filled with a barely restrained fury, ready to spill over. I opened the door without saying a word. We need to talk, my mother blurted out immediately without a greeting. I stepped back slightly, leaving the door ajar, not inviting her in. Layla, she continued, her voice nearly hissing through clenched teeth. I just got a letter from your lawyer, and Ava? Ava got a call from the bank asking to verify the mortgage. What the hell have you done? I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. What have I done? I emphasized each word. I protected my identity, Mom. Through the law. You're suing your own family, she practically screamed, her voice high and sharp. Do you know this will destroy everything? Families don't take each other to court, Layla. What will people think of us? I didn't flinch. My eyes held hers. No avoiding, no glancing away like I had done for 29 years. Family. I repeated, my voice steady as steel. Families where people ask for permission. Not where they secretly forge identities and trap me in a debt of nearly $500,000. Then act like it's no big deal. Family doesn't steal the name of the person they claim to love. She froze for a second, then attacked again. Needs. It was for Ava. She needed help. She's your sister, Layla. You've always been the strong one. You have to understand. No. I interrupted, for the first time in my life, daring to cut off my mother while she tried to justify the family's betrayal. I don't have to understand anything. I've been understanding for 3 decades. Understanding why my sister always got defended when she messed up. Understanding why I was always the one who had to sacrifice without being asked. And now I understand something else. I've been too kind, too patient. And that only made you all see me as an endless wallet. A crutch you never needed to ask permission to lean on. My mother trembled. Her face flushed red, from rage and from being exposed. She looked around, as if hoping someone would witness the scene so she could slip into the victim role she often played when confronted. Layla, I didn't think you could be this cruel, she said softly, but her words cut deep. Do you know how much Ava's suffering? She's been crying all night, not eating, saying her own sister wants to ruin her life. I let out a cold laugh, like ice cracking. I'm not ruining anything. Ava signed a loan under my name. She walked herself to this point. No, it was me, she confessed, eyes widening as if cornered. For a moment. I had suspected, but hearing her admit it, felt like a knife straight to the chest. So it was you. Because I knew you would never agree, she shouted, no longer hiding. You're always about rules and principles. I just wanted to help her. It was only a signature, Layla. One signature and now everything's a disaster. Why do you have to make it such a big deal? I took a deep breath, palms clenched. Not to strike, but to keep from shaking. A signature can destroy a person's life. You took my identity, tied it to a loan I didn't know about, and you called it help. And when I protect myself, you call me cruel. She said nothing, her eyes filled with disappointment. Not in herself but in me, for daring to finally stand up. I looked at her one last time. I'm not your Layla anymore. The daughter who bit her tongue, nodded along, handed over money without asking why. She disappeared the moment you signed her name on a mortgage without permission. I stepped forward and gripped the door handle. You should go. You'll regret this, she hissed. One day, you'll regret turning your back on your family. I gently closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt like a nail sealing the coffin of every illusion I'd held about family. Not a single tear. Just a cold clarity. The kind that comes when you finally realize some relationships, once rotten to the core, are only worth preserving by staying away. 2 weeks after my mother showed up at my door, I received a priority mail envelope from Prescott and Maynard Bank. It was thick, printed with the bank's logo and stamped in bright red, confidential. I opened it with the letter opener, my heart pounding but my hands steady. The letter was written in the formal, detached language of banking, every sentence carefully crafted to avoid liability, yet it still acknowledged one thing. I had been right. We confirmed that based on preliminary review and reports from law enforcement, there is clear evidence of identity fraud involving the mortgage account under the name of Ms. Layla Morgan, opened on April 12, 3 years ago. Immediately after came the statement. The bank would temporarily freeze the loan, halt all collection actions, and officially remove negative impacts on my credit report pending investigation. There was no direct apology at the beginning. But at the end, they wrote, "We sincerely regret the inconvenience this matter has caused you. We are committed to cooperating fully with the authorities and your legal representative moving forward." I folded the letter, set it on the table, and stared at the empty wall in front of me. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw things, to let out the rage I had been swallowing for so long. But I didn't. I just sat still and let the silence do its job. The letter from the bank arrived before I even heard from my lawyer. But Jonathan Reeves quickly confirmed. Not only had the bank frozen the loan, they had sent a default notice to the actual beneficiary of the mortgage, Ava Morgan. And since the house was titled in Ava's name, even though the loan was under mine, the bank had officially begun foreclosure proceedings. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I didn't feel guilty either. They chose to act like fraudsters. Now they were facing the consequences. 3 days later, I stumbled upon a Facebook post from an old high school friend, with a photo of the house I knew well. The Maplewood home that had once been Ava's biggest dream. This place is about to be foreclosed. Owner's the daughter of Pastor Thomas. She used to brag a lot. Look at her now. I quietly clicked unfollow. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need gossip in my head. I didn't need the world speaking for me. The law would speak for itself. Since that day, my phone hadn't stopped ringing. At unknown numbers. Familiar ones, blocked ones. I didn't answer. I didn't reply to texts. I didn't respond to handwritten notes left at my door. I let every sound scream behind that thick door. Because I had chosen my path. And it had no room for pity. No space for rotted family ties. 1 week later, Attorney Reeves gave me an update. The police department had officially forwarded the case to the district attorney's office. The proposed charges were identity theft for financial gain, falsifying financial records, and bank fraud. I asked directly, "What are the chances of criminal prosecution?" Mr. Reeves responded without hesitation. "If the DA decides to take the case, your mother, Mrs. Susan, could be charged. Ava, if it's proven she was complicit or knowingly benefited from the use of your identity, will not escape legal consequences either." I nodded. I didn't feel heartbreak. Just a cold sense of relief. Outsiders might call me ruthless, but they didn't know how many years I had been swallowed whole by that thing called eldest daughter's responsibility. They didn't know how many times I gave money without asking questions. How many times I took the short end just to keep the peace. And in return, I got a mortgage worth $500,000. I didn't even know I had signed. My mother's neighbor, Mrs. Clare, left a basket of pastries on my doorstep, with a handwritten note. Layla, you don't know me, but I want to say, you did the right thing. You're braver than anyone I've ever known. If you need anything, I'm nearby. I didn't eat a single pastry. But I kept the note in my drawer next to the letter from the bank, as a reminder. Some people out there understood. Someone stood by me. And most importantly, I stood by myself. The only person I stayed in contact with afterward was Attorney Reeves. He never used flowery words. No encouragement, no sweet talk. Only action. Clear, concrete, decisive. And during this time, that was exactly what I needed. One weekend night, I sat on my apartment balcony, sipping mint tea and watching city lights flicker below. A soft spring breeze swept through my hair, and I remembered 24-year-old Layla. The girl who once dreamed of opening a small bookstore, but shelved it to help Ava pay her third round of college tuition after failing again. I closed my eyes. No regret, no resentment. Because from now on, every decision I make will be for me. That summer came late, but to me, it was the first season in my life where I truly felt I could breathe. No one asked when I would get married. No one suggested I come home for a few days. No more calls asking me to lend a hand to help Ava through tough times. Just sparrows chirping on the balcony, the faint smell of coffee from the kitchen, and silence. So peaceful, it choked me. I began each morning by walking barefoot across the cool wooden floor, brewing a strong espresso, and playing an old jazz record by Ella Fitzgerald. No rush. No deadlines. No one waiting. And I was no longer chasing anyone. I signed up for a pottery class at the local arts center. There were only 7 of us, mostly housewives over 50, and one quiet freshman with dyed blue hair. I didn't care who was who. My hands were covered in clay and glaze, and I learned how to let go of control. The first time I finished a misshapen little bowl, I burst out laughing. No grades, no comparisons. Just me, and a lump of clay slowly taking form under my hands. Every Saturday I biked to the farmer's market in Hoboken. Not to buy anything special, but to touch life. I loved how the vendors called each other by first name. How each bunch of greens still held the morning dew. How children giggled when they got an extra apple. I brought home simple things, a bouquet of sunflowers, a jar of honey from a local beekeeper. Sometimes a freshly baked sourdough loaf. Each item like a brick, slowly rebuilding me from rubble. I hiked alone for the first time in July. Bear Mountain was a little over an hour's drive from New York. I packed 3 bottles of water, 1 protein bar, and a heart still full of bruises. The climb was steep, the sun relentless. I almost turned back 3 times. But every step was a reminder. I didn't need anyone by my side to reach the top. When I stood at the summit, looking down at the Hudson River sparkling under the sun, I laughed. Alone. No selfies, no social media. Just presence. I also began writing again. Not to vent or complain, but to remember. I survived. I wrote down every feeling, every moment, missing nothing. I wrote about the first time I saw the forged signature. Rita wrote about my mother's face when she said, "It was just a signature." Wrote about the last time I closed the door behind her. Gently, but firmly. Writing made sure I didn't forget, and I didn't want to forget. Because forgetting opens the door for it to happen again. I chose to remember, to protect myself. One Monday afternoon, while watering my orchids on the balcony, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Hello, is this Ms. Layla Morgan?" I'm Nora, an editor from Harper Grant Publishing. We came across a few excerpts from your blog. Someone sent them to us, and I was wondering if you might be interested in developing them into a full manuscript. I froze. Mrs. Wog? I had only posted a few scattered thoughts on an anonymous writing platform, just as a form of self-therapy. I never thought anyone would read them. Certainly not a real publisher. I replied quietly. I never really thought about that. Nora chuckled gently through the phone. We believe raw, honest stories like yours have value. They can reach more people than you realize. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not for a degree. Not for a job title. Not for a good credit score or for being the obedient big sister. But for being me. Just me. I began drafting my first manuscript in August. No rush, no pressure. I gave it a working title. Don't call me strong, I just wasn't given a choice. Each line peeled away years of frozen silence inside me. I wrote, then cried. Wrote Abby, then laughed. Wrote, then sat in silence for hours. But I never stopped. Because every sentence was a step forward, out of the shadow of silence, out of the sugar-coated lies I once called family. That night, I played an old Nina Simone record. I'm feeling good. Her rich, powerful voice filled every crack in the walls, soaked into my skin. I sat alone in my small kitchen. No fancy dinner. Just a bowl of lentil soup and a cheap glass of wine. But I had never felt so rich. Not because of money, but because I no longer owed anyone. Not in paper, not in silence. I didn't need anyone's forgiveness. I didn't need anyone's approval. I only needed one thing. And I had found it. That day was a windless Sunday afternoon, exactly 10 months since the day I signed the police report. I had just returned from an outdoor craft fair, my arms full of a few rough ceramic mugs I'd bought from a local artisan. When I saw them, 3 people were waiting at the front entrance of my apartment building: my mother, Ava, and my father. All 3 looked shockingly worn down. My mother, who always appeared with flawless makeup and a perfectly pressed dress, now wore a frayed gray sweater, her hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. Ava stood behind, holding a torn handbag, eyes swollen and red, head bowed low as if trying to avoid my gaze. My father stood silently, both hands in his pockets, his posture hunched like a faded shadow. They didn't speak right away. They just looked at me. I paused at the steps, tightened my grip on the fabric bag holding the pottery, then said, softly as a breeze, I didn't think I'd see you again like this. My mother stepped forward. Her voice was hoarse, like someone who had cried for many nights. Layla. I know. I was wrong. But we're family, and now, we need you. I stood still. I felt no anger, no sorrow, just an emptiness. Clean, quiet, and solid. Ava raised her head, her voice cracking like an overstretched string. I don't have a home anymore. They took everything. I'm sorry, Layla. I know I was wrong. But you're the only one left. My father said nothing, but he looked at me. That look. No arrogance, no excuses. Only despair. I didn't scream. I didn't blame. I didn't bring up old wounds. I asked only one question. Are you here because of me? Or because I still have assets? No one answered. I nodded. That told me everything I needed. I stepped up the stairs. As I passed by, my mother grabbed my arm. You can't abandon your own blood like this. I raised you, sacrificed so many years for you. I turned and looked directly at her. Sacrificed? You didn't sacrifice for me. You trained me to be the pillar you and Ava could lean on, then called it family. But that's over now. I'm free, and I'm not coming back. Ava sobbed. Her tears caught in her throat. You can hate me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance. I looked at my sister beloved once called the one who needed help. The one who, alongside my mother, signed the financial sentence that dragged me to the bottom. I didn't see an enemy in front of me. I saw a consequence of choice. I gave you all 30 years of chances, I said, my voice eerily calm. Now, I'm keeping the rest of my life for myself. I opened the door to the building and walked in. Behind me, no one followed. No one called my name. No one asked for another chance. Only the sound of the automatic glass door sliding shut behind me. A click in the quiet. Like a final period. That night, I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the balcony, legs propped on a small wooden stool. A soft breeze passed through my hair, carrying the scent of freshly bloomed jasmine below. I didn't think about them. I didn't revisit my blog. I didn't write that night. I just sat there, in silence, drinking tea. And I realized something. Sometimes, the quietest walk away is the loudest thing you'll ever say. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything. But to declare one truth. I survived. I chose. And I walked away. Once. And for good. Layla's story is a powerful reminder that not every relationship labeled family is worth preserving. Sometimes the cruelest betrayals come from the people closest to us, and kindness without boundaries becomes a shackle. Layla bravely chose to protect herself, stood up through legal means, and learned to love herself through every step of healing. Her greatest lesson is this: freedom doesn't come from forgiveness, it comes from knowing when to say, enough. What do you think about Layla's decision? Was she right to cut ties with her family to protect herself? You will have to train your replacement over the next 2 weeks. I thought I had misheard. But then the cold, satisfied look in his eyes made it clear. There was no joke here. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. I had prepared myself for many career scenarios. Being opposed, having my budget slashed, even being ignored. But I had never imagined the day I would be tossed out like an expired product. And the worst part? I wasn't the victim of a tough decision. I was the victim of cold-blooded calculation. I sat frozen in the leather chair by the glass conference table, facing Charles Denning, the CEO of Novalogic Software. The man I once believed valued people. Over the past 10 years, I hadn't just helped the company build its internal platform, I had helped triple its client portfolio. I had poured my heart into every line of code, every update, every sleepless night spent patching bugs I hadn't even caused, all of it just to be met with. We found a more cost-effective solution. Charles was in his 50s, a few strands of gray in his hair but still maintaining a dignified appearance in his expensive tailored suit. He leaned back, folding his hands across his chest like he was bestowing a favor. I used to respect him, but the way he delivered the termination, cold and polished like a shareholder presentation, made me realize I had never truly been a person in his eyes. I understand this is a shock, Lucy, but we are restructuring, he said. You mean cutting me to hire a fresh graduate at half my salary? I asked, my voice dry. Charles smirked slightly, no confirmation, no denial, that silence was the cruelest confession. You will still receive full pay for the 2-week transition period along with a generous severance package, he continued, as if consoling a child who just lost their candy. I clenched my jaw to keep my face emotionless. Everyone else in the conference room avoided looking at me, even Julia, the HR director, who once drank with me at the company's year-end party and confided about her divorce. Now Julia was glued to her laptop screen, as if I were a stain on the carpet that needed to be cleaned up quickly. No one spoke. No handshake, no thank you. Only the hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of my heart. You may leave early today, Lucy. We'll reach out to schedule your transition meetings, Charles said, like he was granting me a favor. I stood up, my legs heavy as if I had just sprinted through a nightmare. But I refused to let them see me falter. I straightened my collar, grabbed my handbag, and walked out of that room with my spine as straight as steel. They wanted to see me break? Not a chance. Only when I stepped into the elevator did I allow myself a deep breath. It felt like someone had stabbed me through the chest. 10 years, 3,652 days. Gone. In a snap. All those missed birthdays, nights coding until 2 in the morning, emergency calls in the middle of the night to fix someone else's broken script. All erased by one phrase. It's just business, nothing personal. But to me it was personal. Very personal. I stepped out of the Novalogic Tower, the glass fortress I once thought I would stay in until retirement, and felt like I had just been exiled from a world I built with my own hands. The people I had mentored, the systems I had saved from collapse, now meant nothing because of one spreadsheet line. Cost reduction strategy. Fiscal year 25. When I reached my small 14th floor apartment, the pain was still there, but I didn't cry. What I felt wasn't despair. It was coldness. A strange, sharp clarity. They thought I would beg? They thought I would quietly train my replacement? They had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just an employee. I was the architect of Novalogic's entire system backbone. And more importantly, I still held the exclusive patent for the software they depended on. I sat frozen in the armchair by the window, the city lights filtering through the thin glass, casting a pale yellow glow on my face. Beside me was a glass of wine, long gone cold. I didn't take a sip. I was counting the shattered pieces of 10 years, smashed by a single callous phrase. But from the depths of that humiliation, a sharp thought rose like a blade. They had just fired the owner of the system their company relied on. I stood up and walked into my home office. My old HP laptop, the loyal companion through every technical crisis over the past decade, lit up instantly. I opened a folder named Titanium_Backup. Something Charles Denning and his board never bothered to ask about. Their first mistake was assuming I was just a coder. Their bigger mistake was forgetting who had designed the core framework of NovaCore, the engine that powered all of Novalogic. The entire infrastructure, from customer payment gateways, internal security, data management, to AI tools, was built on an architectural model I had conceived and developed. Every line of code, every optimization equation, every encrypted system fragment, bore my mark. And the most important part? I held the patent, legally. Registered under Lucy Barrett, at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, since 2016. I never disclosed that to anyone, not even to the heads of the tech departments, not even to Julia, who once called me the backbone of Novalogic. In the early days of NovaCore's development, Charles had promised to consider transferring the intellectual property rights after the Series B funding round. But once the money started flowing, that promise evaporated like cheap cigarette smoke in a boardroom. I stopped asking, I simply acted. I hired a lawyer. I quietly registered every piece of intellectual property under my name, setting up encryption layers that could verify ownership instantly if contested. I didn't need their signatures to transfer ownership, because they had never required me to sign anything surrendering my rights in the first place. I scrolled through the legal documents in my secure drive. Patent registration awesome. US 9,876,543 B2. Real-time modular data processing platform with independent access. Copyright certificate for the NovaCore interface. Federal exclusive commercial exploitation rights. Never assigned. One basic mistake Charles made, he never forced me to sign any IP transfer agreement. Probably because he thought I was too loyal, too docile. I opened a draft document titled, Notice of Termination of Software License. Addressed to Novalogic Inc., Legal Department. Attached were links to proof of ownership, with the termination of license effective at 6 o'clock sharp next Monday morning. I knew the consequences. The system wouldn't crash immediately, but all critical accesses would be suspended. Management dashboards would return invalid encryption errors. Payment APIs would no longer validate requests. And internal systems would begin receiving this message. Software license expired. Please contact the author. I didn't need to hack them. I didn't need to break in. I only needed to reclaim what was never theirs. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked onto the balcony. The cold Chicago night wind slapped my face awake. I closed my eyes and wondered, how would they react when they realized they no longer owned the software? And then I pictured Charles Denning, slamming the conference table, his face pale, shouting at the IT team. Why did we lose access? Why did the system stop authenticating? Call Lucy now. I wouldn't answer. I didn't need to scream, didn't need to retaliate loudly. My silence would be the most powerful statement. I returned to the desk and opened a note file titled, Predicted Reactions from Nova Logic. Day 1. Call me back, propose negotiations. Day 2. Threaten to sue. Day 3. Beg. Day 4. Media crisis begins. Day 5. Investors panic. Day 6. Board of directors forces Charles to resign. I sighed. Not because I was tired, but because I knew every step they would take, and I was already 6 steps ahead. And they should have known that too. I was the one who designed the entire system. No one understood it better than me. No one could replace me with someone cheaper without paying a price. I set the wineglass back on the table. No bitterness, no sting anymore. I wasn't seeking revenge, I was simply reclaiming what was mine. When I stepped back into the NovaLogic office on Monday morning, the atmosphere seemed as if no one realized they were standing on a ticking time bomb. I walked past the reception desk as usual. The new girl, Heather, the newly hired software engineer, smiled awkwardly. She was the one selected to replace me. About 24 years old, blonde hair, bright and painfully naive eyes. I didn't hate her. Honestly. She was just a pawn placed on the wrong square. And me? I was the one who designed the board. Charles called me into the conference room at 10 o'clock sharp. He still kept up his fake confidence act. Crisp white shirt, dark blue tie, voice full of theatrical sincerity. Lucy, I really appreciate your professionalism during this transition period, he said, his voice dripping with sweetness. I stayed because I'm abiding by my contract, I replied shortly, my hand never leaving my notebook. He forced a smile, a strained smile for someone he thought had failed. Wrong, Charles. I never failed. I was just waiting for the right moment to end the game. The next 2 weeks passed in cold, tense silence. I trained Heather line by line, pointed out important system checkpoints. Every time she asked about the core structure, I simply smiled. That part runs automatically, no need to worry. She didn't know, and no one knew, that the system didn't run automatically at all, without periodic authentication keys issued from an independent server I hosted at home. No one at NovaLogic had access to it. No one ever asked. They thought I was meek, submissive. They thought I would leave quietly, letting everything go. But I hadn't let anything go, I was just holding on to my rights. My final day at the company arrived with a pitiful indifference. No flowers. No farewell words. No goodbye lunch. Charles didn't show up. Heather awkwardly said, "Good luck," while Julia, the one who used to call me sister during drinking nights, only gave a cold nod when I walked out the door. I stepped into the elevator at 5:45 in the evening, carrying a small box containing a few files, an old photo, and the Employee of the Year 2019 trophy. A joke. But I kept it, as proof of what I had accomplished and how quickly they erased it all. The elevator doors closed. I pulled out my phone and opened the Secure Vault app. Password: NVLL_Rev6. Fingerprint confirmation. A soft ping sounded. Command: execution time, 6 o'clock in the morning, next Monday. The license revocation order had been sent to the control server, automatic, irreversible, I didn't need to sit in front of the screen. I didn't need to press any more buttons. Everything had been meticulously set up beforehand. Like a conductor leaving the stage while the symphony soared toward its climax. The weekend passed in silence. I didn't leave my apartment. I read books, brewed coffee, occasionally checked the system's activity history to make sure the revocation command remained intact. Sunday night, I slept the deepest sleep I had had in years. No nightmares. No anxiety. Monday morning I woke at 5:45, put on a robe, brewed coffee, opened my laptop. 6 o'clock sharp. The system displayed. Nova Core license revoked, server authentication denied. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness spread in my mouth, as soothing as cutting away a binding rope. 6:12 a.m. Nova Logic internal emails, failed. 6:25 a.m. Customer portal inaccessible. 6:41 a.m. Accounting system returned authentication errors. 7:03 a.m. Entire executive dashboard shut down. I sat there, silently watching from afar, like observing a building collapse without lifting a finger. The only thing I did was reclaim my rightful property. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning my phone rang. Julia's number flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. 8:14, Heather called, probably panicking, unable to understand why commands weren't running. I silenced the phone. 8:29. A message from an unknown number. Lucy, this is Bill, the CTO. We need your help, the system is facing a critical failure. I didn't reply. 8:47. Charles called, for the first time in 2 weeks. I stared at his name flashing on the screen, the blinking light reflecting off my stone-cold face. I let it ring. And ring again. The third time, I picked up. Lucy! Charles's voice came through, urgent, laced with desperation. I need you, can you come back, at least to… I cut him off. I can't, I'm no longer affiliated with Novalogic, the license has expired. You knew that, or at least you should have. We'll pay whatever you want, he stammered. We need the system back. Our clients are panicking. I pressed my lips together, my voice calm. Charles, you had the chance to keep me. You chose to lose me to save your budget, now save the company too. I hung up. Not because I was cruel, but because I owed them nothing. 8:58 a.m. Novalogic's customer portal returned a 503 service unavailable error. 9:02. Internal authentication system denied. Root access. 9:05. All employee accounts were logged out of the servers. 9:07. Every executive dashboard displayed. Software license expired. Please contact the patent owner. I watched that message appear on one of my private monitoring devices connected remotely. No lines of code were deleted, no files tampered with. It was simply that the software no longer belonged to them. From my 14th floor apartment, I quietly sipped my coffee, while the 32nd floor of Novalogic's headquarters in downtown Chicago descended into chaos. Inside the office, where I had once spent 10 hours a day for over a decade, the air was filled with shouting, pounding footsteps, and phones ringing non-stop. Heather was desperately trying to reboot the data routing system. That poor young girl didn't realize that every access she was scrambling for had already been revoked at the root. I can't access the files, the admin account is locked, she screamed over her desk. The internal email server crashed, clients can't send any responses, another employee shouted. Our payment gateway can't verify requests anymore, transactions are stuck everywhere, the finance department reported in panic. An emergency meeting was set up within 20 minutes. Charles, his face as red as a beet, clutching his phone like he might crush it, stormed into the room like a man lost on a battlefield. Can someone explain what's happening? He snarled. It's the software, Charles. Bill, the CTO, choked out. We no longer have a license to use it. I could almost picture Charles's face at that exact moment, his mouth dropping open, then snapping shut, his eyes wide, sweat forming on his forehead, his brain struggling to process information it didn't want to accept. What the hell? We own the software. No, sir, Bill shook his head. Lucy never signed over the IP, the patent is still registered under her name, all we ever had was conditional usage rights, and now, those conditions have expired. Silence. then a loud slam of a hand on the table. "She can't do this," Charles screamed. "She's sabotaging us." "No, she's not breaking any laws, everything is completely legal," Bill said quietly, bowing his head. I checked. Meanwhile, I sat in front of my laptop, reading every message they sent, every desperate email, every attempt to patch the situation with hollow apologies. "Lucy, we need to talk. We can negotiate. Please think of the customers and the team." I didn't respond, not a single word. 11:45 a.m., Chicago Tech Times reported. NovoLogic faces full system outage, suspected software ownership dispute. 12:12, investment forums began leaking information. NovoLogic no longer has access to internal platforms. 12:27, stocks began free falling. 18% drop in just 3 hours. 1:10 p.m. A major investor sent a formal demand for Charles Denning to make a public explanation. 2:03 p.m. #NovoLogic meltdown began trending on Twitter. Most popular tweet: "Never underestimate the programmer who built your entire system." I let out a dry, humorless smile. Not out of glee. Just clarity. Clarity about how the world works. You can't build castles on a foundation you don't own. 3:35 p.m. My phone vibrated again. Charles's internal line. I let it ring, no rush. Second call. Then, third. I answered on the fourth. "Lucy," he panted. "I know we made mistakes. But you're pushing the entire company to the brink." "I'm not pushing anything, Charles," I said calmly. "I simply stepped aside. You're the ones who charged off the cliff." He fell silent, unable to argue. I continued. "You had the chance to treat people right. Instead of keeping the person who built your lifeline system, you chose to save costs. Well, congratulations, you saved me. And lost everything else. I'll double your salary. I'll offer you shares. You can lead the new tech team." I closed my eyes for a few seconds, then answered firmly. "I don't need more money. And I'm not coming back to fix your mess. I am no longer an extension of that rotten company. I am Lucy Barrett, the person who once carried this entire company on my shoulders, and now, I've set it down." Then I hung up. That evening, I sat alone in front of the TV, watching the financial news. NovoLogic's stock plummeted by a record 32% in a single day. CEO Charles Denning has yet to comment, beyond saying we are actively working to resolve technical issues. As for me, I didn't need to say anything. The answer was clear. I had stepped away from a system I built with my own life. And when the only person who understood it left, it collapsed on its own. 7:32 p.m. My phone rang for the 8th time that day. Unknown number. I let it ring. After the third ring, I answered. A thick, tense male voice. "Lucy, this is Raymond Keller, chairman of the board at NovoLogic. I need to speak with you. Immediately." I stayed silent for a few seconds. Raymond was someone I had only met 3 times in my entire 10 years at the company. The man who always sat at the head of the shareholders' table, nodding vaguely before leaving, as if the air in the room wasn't even worth his time. "I'm listening," I replied, my voice emotionless. "I want to apologize for what happened," he began, his voice pleading. "I admit, we underestimated your role, but now the company is on the brink. We need you to come back." I took another sip of tea, calmly, unhurried. "And what makes you think I would come back?" I asked, my eyes still fixed on the laptop screen broadcasting the financial news with the headline, "NovoLogic collapse, the cost of firing the chief architect." "You can name any salary you want, we're willing to offer you equity ownership. If needed, you can choose your own tech team. We'll even sign an IP ownership guarantee contract this time. Just come back." I stayed silent for a moment. Then I laughed. Not out of spite, but at the sheer irony. You do remember that I submitted an IP protection request 3 years ago, don't you? And the company, including you, rejected it, saying it wasn't necessary, because I was a trusted employee. Lucy, No, Raymond. I'm not angry. I just am no longer naive enough to believe promises. I hung up, without hesitation. 8:15 p.m., Charles called again. I let it ring through, picked up the next time. Lucy, I don't even know where to start, he said, his voice hoarse, as if he had been shouting all day. Start with an apology, but don't drag it out. I'm not in the mood for your performance. Silence. Then, he said, I was wrong. I thought I could replace you. I thought the system was stable. I cut him off, my voice cold as steel. You didn't think anything, Charles. You just didn't think I was worth anything. And now? You're paying for forgetting who laid the first brick of the company you thought you were running. I'll triple your previous salary. I'll put you on the executive board, give you 10% equity, anything. Charles pleaded, the calm veneer completely gone. I looked away from the screen and said bluntly, I don't need anything, no salary, no equity, no executive title. I don't need you. I paused, then emphasized each word. You need me, and unfortunately, I'm no longer interested in being the lifeboat for a sinking ship. That night I received 6 more calls from board members. Some promised full authority to lead the tech division. Others were more flattering. This is a chance to prove your value. How laughable. After 10 years of carrying the load in silence, now they wanted me to prove myself? No, thank you. I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb, placed it face down on the table, and returned to my plan. On the screen, a bold headline. Launching Phoenix Platform, my own tech company. The next morning, I opened my email. My inbox had over 80 new messages, most from CEOs, investors, and journalists. One headline stood out. Tech World requests exclusive interview with Lucy Barrett, the woman who brought down Novalogy. I didn't destroy them, they self-destructed. I simply reclaimed what was never theirs, and the price of their arrogance was an entire tech empire turning into dust. By the 10th email, I came across one from a stranger. I'm Ellen Shaw, investment director at Polaris Ventures. We've been following the developments closely. If you're planning to start a company, we would like to invest. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, the power was in my hands. Not in the hands of those who thought money and titles were the only things that mattered. The last call of the day came at 5:07 p.m. It was Charles, call number 17. I answered. This time, I wanted closure. I'm not calling to beg anymore, he said, his voice low and exhausted. I just want to understand why you did this. I thought for a few seconds, then answered slowly. Do you know what it feels like to be thrown out of the very thing you built? To have 10 years of dedication wiped away by a cost-cutting spreadsheet? I didn't do this out of revenge, Charles. I did it because you needed a lesson. I paused, then added, not because I'm irreplaceable, but because you forgot who the real foundation of this company was. I hung up for the last time. No anger. No regret. Just closure. Wednesday, 8:02 a.m. CNBC's news ticker blazed in bold red. Novalogic stock crashes, down 37% in less than 24 hours. I set my coffee down, my eyes locked on the screen showing Charles fumbling before a swarm of reporters. Wrinkled shirt, loosened tie, exhausted eyes. He looked like a businessman stripped bare in the middle of the street. A female reporter raised her hand, her voice sharp as a razor. Mr. Denning, is it true that the company never signed an intellectual property agreement with Mrs. Lucy Barrett, the developer of the core software? Charles pressed his lips together, replying through gritted teeth. I cannot comment on ongoing legal matters. I gave a dry smile. Cannot comment? Or simply out of excuses? 10:35 a.m. An announcement from Argon Tech Corporation. Due to severe and ongoing system failures at Novalogic, we are unilaterally terminating our service contract, and will initiate legal action for SLA violation. This wasn't a small company. Argon Tech accounted for nearly 18% of NovoLogic's revenue. A contract loss worth almost $40 million. Immediately after, major clients like PowerTel, Zion Commerce, and MedLabs also announced suspension of partnerships, pending clarification of responsibility and damage compensation. Another press release circulated from a law firm representing small business clients. We will file a class action lawsuit to recover damages caused by system failures beginning on the 12th of this month. In less than 48 hours, NovoLogic was under full legal siege from both customers and investors. 1:42 p.m., a message from Ellen Shaw, director of Polaris Ventures. Lucy, you are witnessing an event worthy of tech textbooks, a company worth hundreds of millions self-destructing because they underestimated the one who built it. If you're willing to talk, we'd like to discuss deeper investment plans. I didn't reply immediately. I kept observing every newsline, every panicked call. I refused to answer. 3:27, NovoLogic's emergency board meeting began. I wasn't there, but an old colleague from the tech department messaged me a short update. Charles is being flayed alive in the boardroom. The board's furious. An hour later, an official announcement was released by NovoLogic through Bloomberg. CEO Charles Denning has officially resigned under pressure from shareholders and ongoing legal complaints regarding the system failure. I read that line at least 3 times. Not because I was shocked, but because I was satisfied. Yet satisfaction did not mean gloating. I didn't want him ruined. I just wanted him to understand that arrogance has a price. Collapse. He once looked at me and said, "We need efficiency. You're too expensive." Now he knew what truly was expensive. His mistake wasn't about money. It was misjudging people. That evening I received another call. Not from NovoLogic. Not from the press. But from a federal judge. Ms. Barrett, I've been assigned to review the intellectual property lawsuit regarding the NovaCore software. The documents you submitted are complete and valid. I just want to confirm. You never signed any IP transfer agreements? Correct. I hold the patent, I maintain commercial rights, and I never signed anything transferring them. Good. I will issue an injunction against any reuse or modification attempts during the trial. If they tamper with the source code or use it illegally, they'll face severe consequences. I thanked him, feeling an unexpected lightness. The law was speaking, and for once, I was being heard. The next day, news flooded every outlet. Former NovoLogic CEO ousted amid crisis. Company stock loses nearly 50% in 3 trading sessions. Who is the woman behind the year's biggest tech collapse? I didn't grant interviews. I didn't appear on TV. I stayed silent. Because I knew. Sometimes, silence carries more weight than any speech. That night, standing on my apartment balcony, staring at the city lights sparkling like a miniature universe, my phone buzzed softly. A message from an old friend in the industry. They just listed the entire NovaCore platform for sale for $1. No one dares to buy it. I chuckled. They once tried to sell my soul to cut costs. Now the soulless corpse of their company wasn't worth a penny. Talent doesn't ask for recognition, it forces the world to recognize it. That quote spread across newspapers, social media, and tech forums following NovoLogic's historic downfall. And it was tied to one name: Lucy Barrett. I never set out to become a symbol. I never dreamed of being a hero or an inspiration. But for the first time, the tech world, so used to the silent endurance of its builders, saw an engineer cast aside, rise and make the system itself kneel. Monday, 9:18 a.m., my phone exploded. Messages, emails, LinkedIn notifications, Twitter mentions, endless phone calls. From fledgling startups to top-tier corporations like OrionSoft, Quantum Edge, and Silverbyte, everyone wanted to talk, collaborate, or outright buy the ideas and platforms I had created. Lucy, we're impressed with how you handled NovoLogic. Join us, the CTO seat is yours. We're ready to sign a 7-figure contract immediately. All conditions are yours to set. You'll have full control over the tech team. You won't work for anyone. You'll lead. I skimmed through every offer, every dazzling number, every flattering word that, just a few weeks ago, no one bothered to say to me. It was all too late. It was no longer time for me to seek opportunities. It was time for me to create them. That afternoon, I met Ellen Shaw from Polaris Ventures. Their office was on the 45th floor of Union Point Tower, overlooking Lake Michigan. A serene view, the opposite of the storm I had just weathered. Ellen was a sharp, practical woman in her 40s. No pretense, no wasting time. "I'm not here to hire you, Lucy," she said as soon as she sat down. "I'm here to invest in you. The world has seen what you can do. Now they'll see what you build next." I didn't answer right away. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward her. "Phoenix," I said. "My project's name, not just software. An ecosystem. A tech company focused on decentralized data security, run by real architects. No overlords, no shareholder boards obsessed with profit sheets." Ellen nodded slowly, her eyes lighting up. "You don't want revenge, you want redefinition." "I'm not seeking revenge," I emphasized. "I'm rebuilding. And I'm not building for someone else. I'm building for myself. And for those like me. Talented, dedicated, but made invisible." Less than 10 minutes later, Ellen extended her hand. "Polaris will seed invest $5 million. No operational interference. Full decision-making power remains with you." I shook her hand. No trembling, no hesitation. I didn't need permission anymore. I opened the door myself. News about Lucy Barrett founding Phoenix Labs swept through the tech world like a wildfire. The woman who toppled NovaLogic is now redefining the entire software industry. Lucy didn't just reclaim power. She's redrawing the map. Phoenix Labs could ignite a new tech era centered on engineers. Former talented engineers, once pushed out of big companies, began reaching out to me. Names that had once been sidelined for not fitting the strategy now messaged me, asking to join. Not for money, but for an ideal. To create, not just execute. I handpicked every person, not by degrees, not by reputation, only by one thing: ability and ambition. I still remember that first night in the temporary office. A converted old penthouse turned into a small workspace. I stared out the window, where Chicago's lights blinked like living circuits. The phone rang. It was a reporter from TechFront, the biggest tech news channel on the East Coast. "Lucy, are you aware that the entire industry is watching your every move? Are you afraid of that pressure?" I smiled lightly. I lived under invisible pressure for 10 years. At least now, people are paying attention. "So what's your goal with Phoenix?" I answered without hesitation. "Not just to prove something, but to make sure no one else has to prove they deserve respect, ever again." That night, I sat alone, opened my laptop, and wrote the first line on the company's website. "Phoenix Labs, where those once overlooked create what the world can no longer ignore." I wasn't a victim, I was proof. And no one could take that away from me anymore. Day 1 of Phoenix Labs. I walked into the new office with a folder in my hand and didn't look back. Not because I forgot the past, but because I owed it nothing anymore. The 6th floor of a small building in West Loop, Chicago was transformed into Phoenix Labs' first space. The tech company I founded using the settlement money from the NovaLogic lawsuit and the $5 million seed investment from Polaris Ventures. No flashy signs, no hollow executive suites. Just me and the first 7 people. Engineers, programmers, researchers, who had once been undervalued, cast aside by big corporations for not fitting the company culture. I looked at them, offering no promises of paradise. I said only one thing. Here, ability will be heard, and talent will lead. The first morning passed with the sound of keyboards clicking, system diagrams sketched on smartboards, and bitter but warm cups of coffee. We didn't start with the fundraising plan, We didn't chase glossy branding, we started with a principle. Every line of code must serve the user, not the executive board or profit margins. Phoenix Labs wasn't created to be a better NovaLogic. It was created to change how the industry treats those who create real value. That evening, I went home and opened the laptop that had followed me through this entire journey. The screen lit up, showing old folders named NovaLogic Processes, Nova Core Source Code, Legal Documents 202003, Charles Final Backup. I stared at each name for a long moment, my hand hovering over the mouse. Then I right-clicked. Delete. Permanently. No recycling bin, no recovery. 10 years of history, millions of lines of code, countless sleepless nights. Gone in a few keystrokes. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need a single trace linking me to the name NovaLogic. The company that once thought of me as an expendable cost. 3 days later, Charles Denning sent an email, no subject. The body contained only one line. I'm sorry. I was wrong. If there's any chance to fix this, please let me know. I looked at that cold, emotionless sentence as if it came from a stranger. Fix? He shredded my value when he had the chance. Now he thought a simple, sorry, could mend a wound already rotted? I typed exactly 2 words. Too late. Then hit send. Without rereading. That afternoon, I had a meeting with Ellen and Phoenix Labs legal representatives to sign the official contracts. The room was quiet, filled only with the sound of papers turning and pens signing. When I set my pen down on the final document, Ellen smiled, her voice brimming with conviction. You know, Lucy, you're not just building a company, you're rebuilding the way we value talent in this industry. I didn't answer immediately, I just said, I don't want anyone to feel like a replaceable object ever again. Phoenix is a beginning, for those who were silenced, cast aside, deemed too difficult to work with. Here, they will redefine the standards. That evening, standing on my balcony, I watched the skyscrapers fading into the sunset. NovaLogic was no longer the headline. They were vanishing from the mainstream, replaced by new names. One of them ours. I picked up my phone and posted the first status on Phoenix Labs' account. There's nothing quieter than a fire burning low. We don't shout, we act. Phoenix rises from the ashes, and it won't stop. Under the post, hundreds of comments poured in. Thank you for speaking up for thousands of silent engineers. Phoenix is the first company I've seen that actually listens to those who write the code. Can't wait to apply when positions open. I read them all. Each line was a piece confirming that I had chosen the right path. Not easy, but right. The next morning, I woke up early. No lingering anxiety, no urgent calls about old system failures, no need to prove my worth to anyone. I put on my coat and walked into the Phoenix office. No flashy signage, no receptionist with scripted greetings. Only the sound of true creativity unfolding every minute. I walked past each desk, saw the focused eyes, the quiet smiles behind lines of code. And I knew. This empire didn't need to scream, we let action speak for us. NovaLogic once thought I was just a replaceable link. Now, I was the one building the entire chain. And I would never look back again. Because the best revenge is never needing them at all. Lucy's story is a powerful testament to rising from overlooked silence to an irreplaceable force. She didn't need to retaliate with noise or destruction, but with quiet, unshakable success. In the real world, sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms, but from the determined actions of those once cast aside. The greatest lesson here: never underestimate the value of those who quietly lay the foundation. Because when they rise, the whole system can collapse. What do you think about Lucy's journey? Was she right to walk away, or should she have given NovaLogic a chance to make things right? I always wondered. If my father had been wealthier, would my mother have loved him? If he had earned more money, would my family have stayed together? Or would she have still found a reason to despise him, to trample on his dignity? My name is Isabella and this is my story. A story that, if you haven't lived through something similar, you might find hard to believe that parents could treat their own child this way. As a child, I didn't really understand what was happening between my parents. I only knew that every day there were fights, mostly started by my mother. My father, David, worked as a technician at a manufacturing company. He didn't make a lot of money, but I remember that when he came home, he always smiled at me, pulled me into a hug, and asked about my day at school. I used to think that was enough, but to my mother, Angela, nothing was ever enough. She always looked at my father with disdain. "You call that making money? Wasting your whole day on some dead-end job?" I remember so clearly the day my father came home, his face filled with pride, telling my mother he had gotten a raise. He was so excited, thinking it would make her happy. But she just stared at him, lips curling into a mocking smirk. "That's it? I thought you finally got yourself a real job." I saw the smile fade from his face, as if someone had just drained the life out of him. Their marriage didn't last long. One day, my father packed his things and left, without a single word of complaint. I was too young to understand why he was gone. All I knew was that after he left, my mother became a completely different person. Or maybe she had always been that way and just no longer needed to hide it. She began playing the role of the struggling single mother in front of everyone. To the neighbors, co-workers, and relatives, she spun a story of an irresponsible man who abandoned his wife and child without a dime. "No one helps me," she would sigh dramatically. "I have to raise Isabella all on my own, working myself to the bone, barely getting a full night's sleep." Every time she said it, she looked exhausted, sometimes even teary-eyed. People believed her. They pitied her, and even as a child I could tell she enjoyed their sympathy. But the truth was, my father never abandoned me. He sent child support every month. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my life better. I knew this because I saw my mother take a check out of the mailbox every month. She would hold it up, stare at it for a moment, then laugh bitterly. "Look at this, Isabella. Your father actually thinks this is enough to raise you? What a pathetic man." Then she would either rip up the check or shove it into a drawer, pretending it never existed. I grew up surrounded by lies. I didn't dare protest, didn't dare ask about my father, because I knew that whenever I mentioned him my mother's rage would explode. And when she was angry, things only got worse for me. I never understood why she hated him so much. But one thing was clear. She didn't love me either. I was just a tool, a prop for her performance. And I realized early on that in my mother's world, only one thing mattered. For a long time I thought my mother treated me horribly because she was cruel to everyone. But then I realized she wasn't cruel to everyone. Because when the right man came along, she became a completely different person. I was about 10 years old when my mother met James. He was nearly 15 years older than her, wealthy, powerful, and most importantly, convinced that my mother was a struggling, single mother doing her best to raise a child alone. It didn't take much effort for her to make him believe that. To James, my mother was gentle, fragile, a devoted mother who had been unfairly beaten down by life. They got married after just 6 months of dating. I remember the wedding, a lavish event with fresh flowers, an expensive gown, and distinguished guests. But what I remember most wasn't the extravagance. It was the way my mother looked at me when everything was over. The fake sweetness was gone. The warm smiles had vanished. Instead, there was only irritation, as if I were nothing but a thorn in her side. After we moved into James's mansion, I quickly learned my place in this new family. I wasn't my mother's daughter anymore. I was an extra. At first, she was just indifferent. She forgot to do my laundry, leaving me to wear the same wrinkled, oversized hand-me-downs that the housekeeper managed to find. While my mother and James enjoyed lavish dinners with steak and wine, I was sent to the kitchen with a simple reminder. There's bread and peanut butter. But that wasn't the worst part. My mother started interfering with my schoolwork in ways I never expected. Assignments I had spent hours working on mysteriously disappeared from my backpack. When I asked, she just shrugged. "Maybe you should be more careful." My grades dropped. Teachers started calling home. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope. If my teachers knew something was wrong, maybe they could help me. But my mother only smiled sweetly at them over the phone. I'm really worried too. She's just been so distracted lately, always playing around instead of focusing. And just like that, the problem became my fault. But the worst was yet to come. One day, my mother announced that she was pregnant. James was overjoyed, and once again she fully embraced her role as the delicate, vulnerable woman in need of care. "You need to be more responsible now, Isabella," she told me, one hand resting on her stomach, even though there was no sign of pregnancy yet. "I need to rest. I'm counting on you." I didn't need anyone to explain what that meant. I had already stopped being her daughter, but now I wasn't even a child anymore. I was a maid, a ghost in my own home. And the scariest part? No one noticed. Except me. I don't know exactly when I started thinking about leaving. Maybe it was the night I stayed up scrubbing dishes while my mother lounged on the couch, complaining about her aching back. Maybe it was the morning I went to school hungry because my mother had, accidentally, forgotten to make me breakfast, while the table was still covered in leftover pancakes and eggs from her and James's meal. Or maybe it was when I realized that, no matter what I did, I would never be part of this family. One night, as I cleaned up the living room after dinner, James walked by and frowned at me. "Isabella, you look thinner than before." He turned to my mother, who was scrolling through her phone, lounging against a pillow. "Angela, are you sure she's eating properly?" She didn't even look up, just shrugged and smirked. "She's just going through puberty. Probably losing her appetite." I stood there, gripping the dishcloth, heart pounding. James seemed mildly concerned, but he didn't press the issue. And life went on as usual. I knew then, if I didn't save myself, no one would. That night, when everyone was asleep, I snuck my phone out and called my father. I wasn't sure if he would answer. We hadn't spoken in years. But on the third ring, his voice came through. "Isabella?" I almost broke down at the sound of it. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it trembled anyway. "Dad? I can't stay here anymore." There was a long pause. I held my breath, afraid he would say there was nothing he could do. But then his voice came through. Firm and steady. "Pack your things, I'm coming." The next morning, my heart pounded as I carried my small suitcase down the stairs. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Where do you think you're going, Isabella?" I swallowed hard. "I'm going to live with Dad." Instead of anger or surprise, she simply raised an eyebrow and slowly nodded, as if she had been expecting it. Then she smiled. A strange smile, empty of sadness or regret. "Good. James and I could use the extra space for the baby." Her words stunned me. I had expected something, a little sadness, a little hesitation. But I realized, to her, I had never really belonged. I was just something to be discarded. As I stepped outside, my father's car was already waiting. He got out, his eyes filled with concern. Without a word, he opened his arms, and I ran into them. For the first time in years, I felt safe. I didn't look back. I knew my mother wouldn't be standing there watching me leave, because to her, I had never truly mattered. But to my father, I was everything. And that was all I needed. My life changed completely from the day my father took me away. I still remember the first moment I stepped into my father's apartment. A place that wasn't big or luxurious, but warm, and filled with care. Everything was neat and organized, with a room just for me. He didn't ask much about my past life with my mother. He simply said, "You don't have to look back anymore. We can start fresh now." And he kept that promise. My father worked harder than anyone I had ever known. He left his old job and started his own small tech company. I watched him build it from the ground up. Through the stressful days of financial struggles, the first contracts, and slowly, the company began to grow. When I was 14, we moved into a nicer home. When I was 16, he bought me my first car. Not a luxury vehicle, but an old sedan. Enough to give me the freedom to get around on my own. I no longer had to worry about food or dirty clothes. I was no longer invisible in my own home. I went to a good school, was encouraged to pursue my dreams, and for the first time, I felt genuine love from a family member. The years passed by like the wind. I threw myself into my studies, earned top grades, and participated in extracurricular activities. I didn't just want to succeed, I wanted to prove that I could do anything, that I was no longer the abandoned little girl my mother had left behind. When I graduated high school with honors, I received a scholarship to a prestigious university. My father cried at my graduation ceremony. He hugged me tightly and whispered, "I always knew you could do it." And I believed him, because he was the first person who had ever truly believed in me. 4 years of college flew by. I graduated with honors, and on that day my father handed me a special gift, a small apartment in the city. "Consider it a reward for everything you've accomplished," he said, holding out the keys. I was speechless. I just hugged him, knowing that everything he did was always for me. I thought my life had finally become perfect. But then, the nightmare began. My father got sick. I found out when I received a call from the hospital. A cold, merciless diagnosis: terminal cancer. My world shattered in an instant. I couldn't imagine a life without my father in it. The following months, I quit my job and moved back in with him, dedicating all my time to his care. I sought every possible treatment, consulted the best doctors. But his condition worsened. One evening, as I helped him lie down in bed, he held my hand, his voice weak but steady. "Isabella? Promise me one thing." I nodded, my eyes burning. "Be happy, don't let the past hold you back, live the life you deserve." I wanted to tell him he would be okay, that I would find a way to save him. But I knew I couldn't lie. I just squeezed his hand and whispered, "I promise." 2 weeks later, he passed away. I was by his side until the very end, holding the hand that had protected me for so many years. I didn't cry on the day he died. I only felt empty. But I knew a storm was coming. And I had no idea that the woman who had abandoned me all those years ago, my mother, was about to return. 3 weeks after my father's funeral, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. But a part of me, the part that was still drowning in grief and loneliness, pressed the button. "Isabella? It's your mother." The voice made me freeze. How many years had it been? 7, 8? Since the day I left her house, she had never called, never checked in on me. But now, with my father gone, she had suddenly appeared. "How are you, sweetheart?" I hesitated. Sweetheart? Since when was I her sweetheart? "I heard about your father." "I'm so sorry, Isabella. I know how close you two were. I just wanted to say that if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but another part, the little girl inside me who had once longed for her mother's love, hesitated. "Thanks," I said stiffly. She continued, her voice soft, as if nothing had ever happened between us. "I think it's time for us to reconnect. I miss you so much, Isabella. I was wrong to let you go like that." I didn't believe her. I couldn't, but in that moment I was too exhausted to argue. I just muttered, "Let's talk later, Mom," and hung up. But she didn't stop. In the days that followed, she called more often. At first, I ignored her. But as my apartment felt emptier and lonelier, I started answering. At first, her calls were simple, asking about my job, my life, how I was coping with my father's death. She said the words I had once wished to hear from her. And I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had changed. But then, inevitably, the conversations shifted. "James is struggling with work, you know, the economy is so tough these days." Thomas is going to college soon and tuition is so expensive, I honestly don't know how we'll manage. I don't want you to think I'm calling because of money, I just needed someone to talk to, but could you help a little? Just so I don't have to worry so much. At first I said no. But my mother was never one to give up easily. I don't know why I gave in, maybe I was too tired to fight. Maybe a part of me still craved family. Maybe I just wanted to believe in her one last time. To see if she had truly changed. So I sent her money. Just a small amount at first. A little to help Thomas with his SAT prep. A little to fix her car. But it didn't stop there. She started calling more often. The small favors turned into bigger ones. And little by little, I found myself being pulled back into the cycle I had sworn never to return to. The call came on a Saturday afternoon, as I sat on my balcony sipping coffee, savoring a rare moment of peace after a long work week. "Isabella, I have something to talk to you about." My mother's voice was light, almost excited. I sighed. Lately, every time she said that, I knew it wouldn't be good. You know, our family hasn't had a real vacation in years. James works so hard, Thomas is about to start college, and as for me? Well, you know, I've never had the chance to travel properly. She paused, as if waiting for my reaction. When I stayed silent, she continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a deep, personal secret. "I just found an amazing European tour package. I mean, it's a rare opportunity, a family experience that I truly believe will bring us closer together. And I was thinking, maybe you could help me out a little." I set my coffee down, an uneasy feeling rising in my chest. "Help you? You mean you want me to pay for this trip?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Oh, Isabella, don't say it like that. You know James and I aren't in the best financial situation. This isn't just about money, it's about family. We can finally make up for lost time." I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the disappointment swelling inside me. I had seen this coming for a while now, yet I had still been foolish enough to hope that my mother genuinely wanted to reconnect with me, not just squeeze money out of me. "No, Mom," I said firmly. There was silence for a few seconds before she let out a laugh, her voice laced with feigned disappointment. "You are so selfish, Isabella. Do you have any idea how much I've sacrificed for you? I just wanted a small vacation and you can't even do that for me?" I gripped my phone tightly, forcing myself to stay calm. "You never sacrificed for me. You never have. All you've ever done is use me." I heard my mother inhale sharply. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Cold and venomous. "You're just like your father. Cold, ungrateful, only thinking about yourself." I let out a bitter chuckle. "If I'm like Dad, then good. Because at least he truly loved me." She sucked in a furious breath. "You'll regret this, Isabella. Don't think you can just turn your back on your family and still live a happy life." I didn't respond, I just hung up. The very next day, I received an offer to travel abroad for a month on a work assignment. I didn't even hesitate. I accepted immediately. I needed to get away, to clear my head. I had let my mother back into my life for far too long. And this time I swore I wouldn't make the same mistake again. After a month abroad, I returned home feeling lighter. Distance had given me the clarity I needed. I had made my decision. My mother would no longer have a place in my life. It was late at night when I arrived at my apartment complex. Dragging my suitcase up the steps, I felt exhausted, but relieved to be back in my familiar space. All I wanted was to collapse into my bed and finally enjoy the peace I had been missing for so long. But when I slid my key into the lock, it wouldn't turn. I frowned and tried again, still nothing. My heart began to pound. Could the building have changed the locks while I was away without notifying me? I stepped back and examined the door. No signs of forced entry, no damage. And then, the door opened. A woman in her mid-30s stood in the doorway, looking at me warily. Behind her, a man, presumably her husband, stepped forward. His expression puzzled. "Who are you?" the woman asked. I froze. Every nerve in my body tensed. I'm the owner of this apartment. This is my home, I said, my voice dry. The woman and her husband exchanged glances. The man slowly shook his head. No, this is our home. We bought it 3 weeks ago. My entire body went cold. It felt like someone had just punched me in the stomach. What? I whispered, unable to believe what I was hearing. We purchased it from a woman named Angela. Angela Hudson. My heart plummeted. My mother. No. No, she wouldn't. She couldn't have. There must be some mistake. I never sold this apartment, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. The woman hesitated, then stepped inside and returned with a stack of documents. She held them out to me. We have all the paperwork. Sale contracts, notarized signatures, everything is legal. If you need clarification, you should probably speak to your lawyer. My hands shook as I took the documents, flipping through the pages. And then I saw it. My signature. Or, rather, a forgery of my signature. My entire body went numb. My mother had forged my name to sell my apartment. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the fury boiling inside me. I couldn't stand there any longer. I mumbled an apology, turned on my heel and walked away from the building. There was no doubt about it. I had been betrayed, again. And this time she had gone too far. I stood in front of my mother's house, gripping my phone tightly, my breath coming in angry bursts. I had driven for half an hour without even remembering the roads I had taken, my mind consumed by one thought: the forged contract and the name Angela Hudson on it. My mother had sold my home. She had signed my name on the paperwork as if I didn't exist, as if I were nothing more than a resource to be exploited whenever she pleased. I pounded on the door with all my strength. Seconds later, it swung open. There she stood, draped in a silky cream robe, a wineglass in hand, looking as if nothing in the world was wrong. "Oh, Isabella, sweetheart. I wasn't expecting you to drop by unannounced," she said, tilting her head, her voice dripping with fake warmth. I stared at her, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe this woman had given birth to me. "What did you do?" I ground out, forcing myself to stay calm. She took a slow sip of wine and casually stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. But I didn't move. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Isabella. Why are you so worked up?" I yanked my phone out of my pocket, pulled up a picture of the sale contract, and thrust it in front of her. "My apartment. You forged my signature and sold it." My voice shook with rage. She glanced at the screen, then laughed. A soft, airy laugh that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, that." She shrugged. "You know, you have so much, Isabella. More than you need. You live in luxury, have a stable career, and yet, you're so stingy." I went rigid. "Stingy?" I repeated, barely believing what I was hearing. She took another sip of wine, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Family is about sharing, Isabella. I've sacrificed so much for you. Don't you think it's time you gave back?" Rage erupted inside me like wildfire. "Gave back?" I hissed. "You never treated me like your daughter. You never loved me. And now? You steal from me and try to justify it with this pathetic excuse." My mother set her wineglass down, crossed her arms, and her gaze sharpened. "So what are you going to do? Call the police? Let the whole world know you sued your own mother?" Her voice was laced with challenge. I looked at her, realizing for the first time that she had never believed I had the courage to stand against her. She thought I would endure it, just as I always had. That I would let her do whatever she wanted. But she was wrong. Slowly I pulled out my phone, holding it up in front of her, my eyes never leaving hers. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "I'm calling the police." And for the first time, I saw my mother's smile disappear. The investigation moved faster than I had expected. As soon as I reported the case, the authorities got involved. Within weeks, all the forged documents, financial records, and my mother's fraudulent signatures were exposed. The truth was even uglier than I had imagined. My mother hadn't just sold my apartment. She was drowning in debt. Over the years, she had secretly borrowed money from various sources to maintain her lavish lifestyle. Extravagant parties, designer clothes, luxury vacations. To cover it up, she had forged financial documents, even faking James's signature to access more money. James was in shock when he learned the truth. I will never forget the look on his face as the lawyer laid out all the evidence. He sat frozen, his face pale, as if the world around him was crumbling. "What have you done, Angela?" James muttered, his voice strained. My mother, instead of the fear I had expected, simply crossed her arms, her expression cold. "I did what was necessary to protect my family," she said, as if defrauding and forging her own daughter's signature was some noble act. James shot to his feet, looking at her as if he were seeing a stranger. "Family? You've been lying to me for years. You don't care about anyone but yourself." Then he turned to the lawyer, his voice firm. "I want a divorce, immediately, and I will be taking full custody of Thomas. I will not let him stay with this woman for another day." My mother went pale. She opened her mouth to argue, but for the first time in her life no one believed her anymore. My mother's case went to trial just a few months later. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Fraudulent signatures, forged bank records, countless high-interest loans, and testimonies from other victims she had scammed over the years. On the day of her sentencing, I was in the courtroom. "Defendant Angela Hudson, your actions were not just a case of financial fraud but a deep betrayal of those closest to you. The court hereby sentences you to 3 years in prison and orders full restitution of all misappropriated funds, including the proceeds from the sale of Isabella Hudson's apartment." The judge's words echoed in the silent courtroom. I didn't know what I expected to feel. Satisfaction? Anger? Relief? But when my mother was handcuffed and led away, she turned back to look at me, her eyes cold and filled with hatred. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You're nothing but an ungrateful child. Don't think you can just walk away from me." I held her gaze for a long moment, then slowly replied, "We don't need to walk away, you destroyed yourself." And this time, I knew for certain, she would never find her way back into my life again. I stood in the living room of my new home, afternoon sunlight streaming through the large windows, reflecting off the polished hardwood floors. This wasn't a small apartment in the city anymore. This was a real home. With a lush green backyard, and enough space for me to finally breathe. After recovering the money from my mother's trial, I decided to buy a new house in the suburbs, far away from the memories of my past. I wanted a fresh start, a place where I could move forward without the weight of old wounds dragging me down. My job at the company my father built continued to thrive. I had spent the past year learning, rebuilding what he had created, and now, I was ready to continue his legacy. Every time I stepped into his old office, I could feel him there, watching, supporting me. James kept his word. He divorced my mother immediately after the trial, and won full custody of Thomas. I didn't know if the two of them still spoke, but I knew one thing for sure. Thomas was free from my mother's manipulation, and that was all that mattered. Thomas reached out to me after everything was over. "Isabella, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry for everything Mom did to you." I remember the long silence before I finally responded. "You don't have to apologize, you were a victim too, Thomas." I didn't hate him. He wasn't to blame. He was just a child caught in a family where lies and manipulation were the norm. Even so, I wasn't in a rush to rebuild our relationship. I needed time. Maybe one day we would become part of each other's lives again. But today was not that day. And my mother? I didn't know, and I didn't care. She had been removed from my life in a way that was irreversible. The letters from prison, the desperate phone calls. I ignored them all. I had given her too many chances, and I would never make that mistake again. Today, I stand at the threshold of a new life. No more manipulation. No more lies, exploitation, or helplessness. Just me, my life, and a future that I would build with my own hands. And for the first time ever, I feel truly free. Isabella's story is not just about escaping manipulation and betrayal. It's a lesson in self-worth and independence. In reality, many people find themselves trapped in toxic relationships where love is weaponized for personal gain. But like Isabella, we always have a choice. The choice to stand up, break free, and reclaim our lives. Because sometimes, family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by those who truly love and respect us.